Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grotto in the Tar Pit. I have a great guest for you guys. His name is John Adolfi. He's a creationist. He does a lot of studies about this structure right behind me, which is believed by many to be Noah's Ark, which I personally believe is Noah's Ark. The dimensions fit perfectly according to the Genesis. It's also in the right area in the mountains of Ararat. So I'd like you all to welcome John.
Thank you very much,
How you doing,
Sergio.
John?
Appreciate it. Very good. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into creation?
Well, when I was in the Navy in San Diego back in '84, I became a Christian. And from there, I read a book called Secrets of the Lost Races by Rennie Nurburgren. And it was my first taste at understanding history from the Genesis or biblical point of view. And in the book, he talks about Noah's Ark, he talks about giant humans, he talks about out of place artifacts, and he talks about um, uh, geological anomalies. And I was just like fascinated with it. Ancient technology, he talked about. And then there was another gentleman by the name of Jonathan Gray who did the same thing, but wrote many books on the subject. And I just was so fascinated with these evidences. I was just compelled to involve myself in this. So in 2001, we commissioned Alfred Lee, who is an archaeological illustrator by trade, and also has been to Mount Ararat and climbed the hills of Mount Ararat or the mountain of Mount Ararat um, four separate times back in '69 and then in early '80s with notables like astronaut Jim Irwin looking for Noah's Ark. And when I wanted to exemplify and have the most, well, this is how I build it in my mind at least, the most accurate rendition of Noah's Ark put on canvas ever. That was the goal. 3 years later, we unveiled it in 2004, and in 2005, we decided to not just change our name, but our ministry was Bible Land Studios, and my wife came up with Lost World Museum. I thought it was a great idea. It sounds a little more secular, and that's really our target audience. Our target audience really is the agnostic who is doesn't have a chip on their shoulder, who are just kind of get through life and are trying to figure things out. And if we can come in and we can show them something interesting that gets their attention, um, that may open up a doorway and lead them down a pathway from agnosticism to a Bible believing Christian. And so that's the idea. But in the meantime, we're touching Christians' lives and challenging just by virtue of our presence the people who are atheistic, atheists or evolutionists. So that's basically how we got started. And then more specifically and more recently, we discovered TikTok back in 2020, and that started our online presence, really started it. And then it spilled over to YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads. And so that's how it started.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've been seeing you. You've been popping up a lot of on the Facebook Reels and the YouTube Shorts. So
Sure.
yeah, that's great. So by any chance, did you ever know Ron Wyatt?
No, I didn't know Ron personally. Now, Ron died, I believe, in '99, if I'm not mistaken. But I know people who knew Ron, and Alfred Lee, who I mentioned earlier, who climbed Mount Ararat. He went over to the Holy Land with Ron, and they went to Ararat. They the first voyage ever on the Red Sea, the real Red Sea. crossing
The Gulf of Aqaba.
was, yeah, was him and Ron. That first time out, it was Ron and it was Alfred. Ron was supposed to dive. Alfred was going to remain topside, and but Ron got sick. I think seasick or something. He got sick, and Alfred was not prepared to dive. The water was so clear, Alfred said, that he was able to see to the bottom. And this was where it was about 70 feet deep. And he illustrated one of the wagon wheels. That was the first documentation of Ron with Alfred. There's been subsequent, obviously, exploration since then, but that was the first time.
Yeah,
And
for you guys
so,
that don't know, on the channel, what's really amazing is that this clearing, or there's a land bridge going from Nueva Egypt all the way to the Arabian Peninsula, and it's a small, I think like 60 feet or something like that wide, and probably like you said about 70 feet deep, and it goes from one side to the other. But on the other side, on each side of that, there's like a 500-foot drop off. So the whole thing of it being there perfectly for them to
it
cross
really
over,
is.
yeah, it's a miracle of God.
I think Alfred, who liked Ron very much, had the best perspective on Ron as far as how Ron rolled, to be really not bowled over by what God is doing through him, what he claims to have found. You know, Alfred said this. He said, anybody that goes into the Middle East and um, where their life is on the line, and Ron's life was on the line more than once, he said, Ron did good work. And now, if you really want to be, and this is secondhand information, I'm not Alfred Lee. I didn't know Ron personally, but I've known, and you guys can see it yourself if you look up Danny Shelton, who interviewed him, had a crew over there when they were exploring the Ark of the Covenant. When they were going down into the pit, into the caverns, they paid $10,000 to Ron to be able to photograph and video what was going on there. And if anyone's interested in hearing the story of what actually happened, and I've heard Danny tell it twice, one on this video and one when Alfred and I were on his program, Three Angels Network, back in 2005, off camera, he told us about the story of what happened over there. So what you got to watch out with Ron is that Ron was intelligent. He was interesting. This is what Alfred told me. Fascinating to talk to, a good guy, but he had a sneaky side of him, and you had to watch out. Alfred told me that when you're over in Turkey, you don't collect anything over there to bring back, something you do not do, because their laws are extremely strict. So there was a man who offered them a chunk of Noah's Ark, and that was too much for Ron to pass on. Alfred, of course, told the man in Turkish, no, thank you. So they go to the airport, and Alfred and him are going through customs. And Alfred said to me that Ron, just before they went into customs, pulled out this object that he purchased from the merchant in Turkey. And he said to Alfred, I don't have space for this. And he put it in his satchel. And he told me the account twice. And the second time he told me, I had to ask this question. I said, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you do something? He says, I couldn't. He says, we were right there ready to go through. And once we went through, then Ron said, oh, wait a minute. Let me take that back. And he retrieved his object. And then they went about their business. Alfred was a very forgiving person. But that's the problem. Now, Ron claims to have found Noah's Ark. He's not the first one. Matter of fact,
It's called the Rupert structure from the person who actually seen it for the first time, which was
right.
actually an aerial photo that was done during I think like he was in the army or something. He was
1959, they had some U-2 plane go over or something and take a snapshot of it. Now, John Morris from the Creation Institute there in San Diego, Santee or San Diego or whatever, I spoke to him. He said that in the 1960s, they went out to look at it. Now, these are
yeah,
geologists.
yeah, I heard about
Ron
that.
was Ron was not a geologist. These were geologists that went out there to see what this thing was about. They used they used dynamite on it
Yeah,
to try to get
I heard
inside
they
of it.
didn't believe it was it. I heard they didn't believe it was the
They
actual.
concluded based on their analysis that it was a lava flow, an anomalous lava flow, and nothing more.
Well, I heard that has something to do with it, that because of the mountains of Ararat, that there was some lava coming out or something like that, that it helped to add to the petrification of the actual wood, which why it look they would actually come up with that conclusion that it's lava flow, but it's actually there's the whole chemical, thing that happens that turns the wood into stone.
Right,
So
right. Well, while everybody's musing over that, there's another faction of belief that it's still up there at 15,500 feet on the northeast side, inside the Hora Gorge, in a valley. Um, there have been over the last 200 years 40 eyewitnesses that have claimed that it's box-like and described where it was located, and there seems to be a corroboration of eyewitness accounts that it's there underneath the layer of ice most all the time. Time will tell. There's nothing wrong with good, honest investigation. And Alfred, even though Alfred did not agree that that was Noah's Ark, the Drupanar site, he also, in the same sentence, would say nothing wrong with investigating until we finally come to the truth. Obviously, since the ice is most of the time hiding a lot up there, if the arc isn't up there, the arc is not up there, and time will tell. Let's say whether global warming is true or not. There are times where that meltback exposes the arc. It did in 1916 when the Russians went up there. It did it again in 1902 when George Hagopian saw it as a young boy. In 1943, when the U.S. was doing flybys and reported 16 millimeter footage and stills were taken of the arc when they were flying by. So there are times where this thing is exposed. So if it's there, it'll get exposed again. This time we're going to be ready.
yeah. So I guess the real problem is that most of the time it's usually covered in ice. Like the picture behind me, it's rare when it's like that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, up at 15,000 feet, there's a glacier there that, you know, it comes and goes, but most of the time it just stays there, you
Yeah.
know.
Is there
So
year round?
yeah. The best time to go to Ararat to explore that area, that specific area, is August, September. I guess what I've heard from my inside folks is that this year is good for tourists to climb the mountain, maybe the south side, but not good to go where this may be located. Not good for people looking to do expeditions. The climate isn't, the political climate is
Arena?
not right at the
Okay.
moment. Yeah.
I actually know of a person. I might have him on pretty soon. He does tours and he's up there in Ararat. He lives right now in eastern Turkey at the base of Mount Ararat.
Very good.
So might have him on soon.
Good, good, good. Supposed to be some solar activity going on this year and next year that some researchers are hoping that it will melt some of that glacier back. So
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see.
And then another thing is like there's always gonna be there's gonna be people that don't want it to be it, even if it really is truly the site of Noah's Ark, which I think it is. Ron White was led to pretty much so many other sites that I kind of have my faith in this one, especially with all the tests that they've ran, and it's kind of like a beating a dead horse in my thoughts. I know you might have a different perspective, but I know for a lot of people, it would be better that it's not because they can get funding to continue to look for it. So for a lot of people, I mean, I see why they would say it's not it.
Sure.
Mhm. So can you tell me a little more about? I was seeing on your reels and stuff that you were talking about the dimensions and of Noah's Ark and how it was built. Can you go elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Kristen, you want to go grab the ark downstairs? The brown one in the pink box? Yeah, I'll be happy to. I got a little model one that I'll show some details about it. Now, when first off, we have the biblical account that
Hmm.
explains that it's got a 6-to-1 ratio of width to length, which is nowadays typical of most of your like tankers, which makes sense because you're trying to not go anywhere. You're just trying to keep,
Stay afloat.
yeah, you're just trying to keep the cargo safe in, while it's in there. And so they have figured. Now, some of these cargo ships are 7-to-1. This one's a 6-to-1 in the height, and they said that for the job that it was to be made for, there was no better ratio width, length, height with what it was designed to do. You could not improve on the ratio, no matter how much boating or ship design that we know now. It was perfect, perfect. When they test tanked this for the movie 1976 movie In Search of Noah's Ark, they built a larger version of this. This version right here that you're seeing has a keel, goes all the way down and underneath it. And nobody thought it had a keel until George Hagopian in 1970 through 1972, when Alfred Lee interviewed him, same Alfred Lee I mentioned earlier. He George Hagopian said that when he was 8 and 10 years old, he stood on top of Noah's Ark the first time and described it. He described the keel, and Alfred questioned him on it, and he said, "I saw a keel. Draw it."
And that would be the Rupenard structure, right? He was
Pardon
talking about
me?
the He was talking about the Rupenard structure.
No,
No.
no. Matter of fact, when Alfred was up there with the French explorer Ferdinand Navarre in 1969, searching for wood, Ferdinand Navarre in the 50s found wood at the 14,000-foot level.
Mhm.
Now, whether that's the ark or not, or a piece of it, or another structure that was built in ancient times up there, don't know. All I know is that he found wood, and they believed that it was Noah's Ark. Anyway, they hired him some 13 years later to go to the same spot, and they brought hand augers and whatnot, and they drilled and they looked for 2 weeks, and they finally found wood, and they extracted it and brought it back to the United States. A year later, a realtor contacts the search organization and Alfred Lee and says, "I know someone who claims to have seen Noah's Ark," and it was his realtor, and he had
Mhm.
not shared this with anyone because he was scared out of his mind, because he was a defector from the Turkish army.
Okay.
And then he had the guts to go back with a 16 millimeter camera to go shoot Noah's Ark.
How would he get in the
He,
country?
well, I don't know, but he ended up in a Russian gulag for a while after he defected from the army, and he spent some time there, a little bit of time there, and then they said, "You got to go." So he went straight to the United States. Then a couple of years later, he got some money and a 16 millimeter camera. This was in 1921, right around that time. And what was going on was the genocide of the Armenians.
Okay.
The Turks were wiping them
Yeah,
out.
because Mount Ararat is close to Armenia, ain't it? It's like the Turkey Armenia border or so.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was a Christian nation,
Yeah, it's
up
the
until
oldest Christian nation,
you're
Armenia.
right. And so they started killing him right off the shore. They were throwing him off the ship and everything. So he didn't even make it across the country. He filmed. He filmed that
Wow.
from afar. He filmed part of the genocide that was going on, came back to the United States, developed the film, and showed it publicly. And some scary men showed up and they warned him. And after that, he shut up about anything that had to do with Noah's Ark, Armenia, Turkey, was silent, never married. And then his realtor, when he was in his 70s, he disclosed to her for probably the first time, because he got close to her, about Noah's Ark. She saw this stuff that was going on in 1969 with the search organization, contacted them, and next thing you know, Alfred Lee is interviewing George Agopian for 18 months, on and off, drawing his memories. And so the Ark that they did the replica of did have the biblical ratios, but also had some of the characteristics that George Agopian shared with Alfred. Now, what's really interesting about this is that it can pitch. They discovered that it could pitch and yaw like almost 90 degrees, and it won't tip over. No water will get inside of it, because this right here is the window, all the way up and down, and in the roof there's a small hole on each of these, and this right here, this area right here, is missing all the way front to back. So you basically have two platforms that don't come together in the middle. Two platforms all the way up and down the ark, two platforms all the way up and down the ark. So why that's important is that when the light and air comes through here, it hits all three of the levels. The fresh air and the light hits all three, just like a mall. Very clever. And they said it could also withstand up to 200, the equivalent of 200-foot waves. The other thing is, and apparently there is a bow and a stern to this thing, even though it looks almost the same. But they said that when it wasn't being touched or anything, it would right itself into the waves. Now, I was in the Navy, and let me tell you something. When you're out at sea, you want to be going into the waves. As soon as you turn the ship, and they have to sometimes, they got to tack it and go in the direction. They always say on the 1MC, which is the announcement system to the entire ship, stand by for heavy rolls. Because as soon as you go parallel or even near parallel to a wave, this is what happens.
Yeah.
But this, they said at the Scripps Institute, Oceanographic Institute, naturally on its own did this into the waves. And they were saying that this is probably one of the most seaworthy vessels that they have ever tested.
Okay. Now, and they believe, or the people that believe these specifications or for this ark, that it's actually in the north side of Mount Ararat proper.
Yeah. So on the northeast side of Mount Ararat, there used to be, if the let's say this is the mountain right here, and about 14,000 feet, 14,000 feet is where you got the snow. That's where it starts. And the ark is about 15,000 to 15,000 feet up, but it's in a valley. So you go, there's lakes on mountains. I don't, in a valley. It's like a valley in a mountain. Yeah. Now, in 1940, Sergio, there was a huge earthquake like Mount St. Helen, and it blew off like 25% of the mountain. Now, get this. There was a monastery called St. Jacob's Monastery that was 9,000 feet up, right directly below where the ark is alleged to be. And inside that monastery, it had Noah's Ark wood and artifacts from the ark. And that's destroyed and buried in hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble now, unfortunately.
So what's your take on the stones? They call this place around Mount Ararat, I think it's the Valley of Eight, right? They call it the Valley of Eight because supposedly those 8 people, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives, so they call it the Valley of Eight. And there's supposedly a bunch of anchor stones all riddled all over through the area. What's your take on that?
I really don't know. I've heard one alternative theory is that they were set up so that you would look through the eye of it and it would point something out that was important, like Stonehenge, where you've got it set up in such a way so that when the solstice happens, the light comes through. Not to say that that was had to do with that, but kind of the same idea. But I honestly don't know. You can
Okay.
make the argument that those were drag stones. I get that.
Mhm.
I don't know if that really makes it, if it's necessary for it, the ark. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the ark had that and they dropped them before, they, as the water was coming down. I don't know.
So you've never been up there to Turkey?
I have not. No. I've been overseas when I was in the Navy, but never in that direction.
Okay. Okay. So, what other well, can I say what other sections of the Bible seem to be your expertise?
Well, um, I find the first 11 chapters of Genesis very, very intriguing because there seems to be no archaeological evidence for it. And seems to be the most disputed that it can be taken literally, including the ages of humans prior to the flood. And, I mean, whether the ark is a Drupanar or it's found on top of Mount Ararat, when it becomes conclusive, if it's on top of Mount Ararat, it's going to be most likely broken into 2 or 3 pieces at this point. That's what they say. But it'll be obvious that it is it. If it is underneath the ice, they'll be able to go inside of it. They'll be able to see what technology was used, how maybe the water was distributed, the cages were designed. It'll be all of that. And I believe they're gonna. And I'll give you a prediction. I believe that on the third floor, I think the Russians were the ones that said this. On the third floor, there was extra large furniture, built-in furniture. I believe Noah was 12 feet tall, and one way to find out if the people before the flood were giants and not any of this angel
Yeah.
human hybrid nonsense. We'll find that there are going to be tables and chairs built in because on a ship, you have everything built in. You don't want anything running around the floor, like a chair. Everything has to be built in, stable. You'll find chairs and tables for 10 and 12 feet people. That's my prediction. That's my hypothesis, my theory.
Well, one thing that I've heard, is that they found an altar around that area of Mount Ararat, and it's seems like it's set up for a sacrifice.
Sure.
But the only thing is, it's a lot bigger than for a normal person. A person would have to be about 12 feet in order to sacrifice on there, as well as the animal would have to be much bigger for it as well. So,
That's interesting. Because I mean, if
um,
we were sacrificing something, we'd probably do 3 feet, 4, five
yeah,
feet,
yeah.
at the most, right?
Yeah, so if it's taller than us, I doubt we're gonna be throwing it up there and trying to climb up and slit its throat up there. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'll tell you something. I'm not an expert at the petroglyphs and stuff that are written all over the walls in Grand Canyon and various other parts throughout the world. But just as like a crime scene investigator, it's like if you see that these paintings have been done what looks like either on a scaffolding or by a very tall person, make note of that because it's very possible that the early ancestors who still retained longevity and height may have been the ones responsible for this artwork that seems abnormally large or difficult to get to with a 5.5 foot person.
Now, do you also subscribe to the canopy theory?
Yeah, there's two theories on that. One that the canopy is more vapor, and then the one that Dr. Baugh talks about, he feels it was more solid, like frozen, solid,
Frozen
Yeah,
than ice.
right. And I don't have any opinion on that one way or the other. These guys are much smarter than me, and but I do believe that there was a canopy because the Bible says that when the waters were parted, that part of it went, on the ground, in the ground. The other half, if it is one half,
It's above the
went up in the
firmament.
atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, so like for those that don't know, it says that there was a firmament, and basically the firmament or is where the first heaven, or however you want to describe it, is where the birds flew. And on top
Right,
of that, it said there was water on top of that. So that's where the theory comes in, that there was a crystalline canopy about 3 fingers thick all around the world that
right.
caused hyperbaric conditions. So there was this man who I was watching this one video. This guy put these little tiny piranha in a hyperbaric chamber, which means he pumped it up to 35% oxygen, which probably before the flood, everything was about 35% oxygen, or the
Sure.
whole world was. And there was a lot more pressure, because right now we have about 50 miles of atmosphere, but all that was condensed into about 10 miles covered by a crystalline canopy. And so he recreated these conditions through a hyperbaric chamber, and those little itty bitty piranha grew to be like 12 or about 2-3 feet.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
I don't know if you know or not, but Dr. Carl Baugh at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, did experiments like that. And he's got a grand experiment he's trying so hard to get off the ground. It's the same thing that you spoke about, but on a much larger scale. He has a tank that is 8 feet tall and about 60 feet long. And they're trying to get the doors to seal. This is something that they have to get right. And in there, they're going to have an electrical tube that ups the electromagnetic field to what it was pre-flood,
mhm,
because it's been every 1,300 years, there's a half-life on the electromagnetic field. And so they're working it backwards and coming up with a certain idea of what it might have been. And they're replicating that inside then they'll increase the oxygen. Then they'll increase the hyperbaric or the air pressure, and then they're going to conduct biological experiments in there.
mhm.
I guess one thing they want to do is get the egg of a tuatara, which is the closest thing to a dinosaur.
Mhm.
And I think the egg itself costs $150,000 because they're uh, they're rare and they're
Mhm.
endangered in Australia.
And a
And
tuatara,
tuatara,
is that a lizard?
yeah, like a lizard, but a reptile. It's weird. It's the closest thing. I can't remember. It's like it's not a lizard, but it's a reptile. Or if it's not a reptile, it's the closest to the thing to a dinosaur. Anyway, what they're going to do is they're going to hatch it
Mhm.
inside
Yeah.
of the hyperbaric chamber, the biosphere, as they call it. And then get this, and this is he says, to see what the full genetic expression is able to do.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah.
I just wish Dr.
That is
Ball was
crazy.
like 20 feet young, 20 feet, 20 years younger. He's getting on in age, and I feel so bad because he's this close of doing something with that. It's going to be extraordinary. He's going to have cameras in there. You'll be able to go
I bet.
online and watch it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. The places technology has taken us. That's
Oh,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I could just imagine. So tell me,
Yeah,
like I know just by listening, there are some few views that we might not agree on, but we're all
that's
united. We're
fine.
all in the same body of Christ,
We're on the
right?
same team. Just
Yeah, we're on the
because
same team.
we have a difference of opinion about, I mean, whatever the truth is, if God allows it to be expressed and it's obvious, and and maybe you're right, but but if not, then it's the other one, then great. The whole point is not Ron Wyatt. The whole point is what the truth is. And
As the God is proclaimed, and
yeah, and God, really, it really is more about that. And Ron has a good track record, great. Um, there are some that follow him as if you don't follow Ron, you're not a Christian. These are Seventh Day Adventist friends that I know that
yeah,
knew Ron personally. and they take it to that level, and it's really too bad because it's not supposed to be that way. Even if Ron is 100% correct, it's not supposed to be like that. It's not a test of fellowship.
Well, in, in,
Oh,
in my in my opinion, it's always been, if it's not a salvation issue, hey, we are on the same team. Once you start taking away from the deity of Christ, then we got a problem.
there you go.
Yeah. So tell me, what do you think the conditions were pre-flood?
Okay, so that's a great question. We see that there's giantism in the fossil record, both with the plants, animals, insects, not everything, but we see it, I believe that extended. And I believe the reason why we see giantism is because that's how they were originally created. And I think that even humans were that way and needed to be able to live after sin 900 years and be 12, maybe 12 plus feet tall. And because 6,000 years of sin, both morally, ethically, environmentally, physically, it takes its toll. Every generation, it takes its toll. And if he had started out with 6 foot beings that only lasted 90 years, we may have already been extinct before that. So I think the forethought was make them more robust, make them live longer even after sin, make them tall, make them strong, genetically incredible. Not having to use pen or paper, they have perfect recall. And Dr. Boss says that working back at 1% genetic degradation per generation, working back 130 generations from today back to Adam and Eve, he believes when you do the math that their IQ is somewhere between 400 to 700. And we barely can get anybody to have not get 200, 220 at the most is like, that's
That's
it. That's the
genius. That's
ceiling.
a super genius. That's not even Einstein. Einstein wasn't even 220.
No, he was 160. I looked it up the other day. But you got to understand that when you look here, and this is where my wife comes in. She looks at the savants and the prodigies and sees what kind of capabilities they had mentally, and then packages all those individual savant qualities, and it says this is what the antediluvian brain looked like. Perfect recall. Perfect recall. Anybody writing
Photographic
something
memory.
down has to be
Yeah,
laughed at.
yeah, I
Why
can
would you
imagine.
write something down if you can recall it perfectly for 400 years?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so you have to, since there were carnal nature and carnal people and people doing evil, and I mean, Cain killed Abel right out the get-go. That there was 1,600 years of evil geniuses on the earth. What did they come up with? Are those monkey men-like creatures, the ones that we really can't account for with the beetle brows, were they some kind of amalgamation? This is just a theory. Um, were the thorns and thistles, were they in the laboratory of Satan, or did he encourage man to make those twigs turn into spines? I don't know, but it wasn't God's design. And those thorns and thistles that we see was not original. Neither was eating each other. And I found out that I heard this a while back that even mosquitoes were fruit eating insects at one time. And
Good Lord,
so,
I wish it were like that today because they're eating me up today.
well, most
Go
of them
get
I
yourself a
found
mango or something.
most of them I found out are fruit sucking that, but there's only a small fraction of them that on top of fruit go after blood. So they were, I think technology was there. I believe, how could it not be? If I was a carpenter, whether I'm a
And you
good
live
guy or
and you live
bad
to be
guy,
1,000 years old, you'd learn to do some things.
amazing things.
Yeah.
And if you look at scripture, gold was laying on the ground. The resources were absolutely unbelievable. There was more land than water. There was all this ease of earning a living. Even after the earth was cursed twice, it still was relatively easy to sustain oneself. I think that their sin knew no bounds, and I think the reason why he had to destroy humankind and the animal kingdom. And I'm gonna go out on a
So
limb here. I think that choosing to do evil was their first choice. Everybody but 8 people. They were they needed God needed to quarantine righteousness. One, that's one. Two, who knows what was going on with the humans and animals at that point, genetically speaking. There could be so much confusion in the animal kingdom and the
oh, just
humankind kingdom.
just by the way, uh, I'm not sure if you've seen it. Some kind of thumb down. I didn't do that. Okay, I'm not sure
Oh,
if
where
you've
was
seen that or
this?
not.
No. Is somebody
I'm just
watching
letting you
this?
know I didn't do that. You didn't see it. I'm
No.
sorry. No, no, nobody's watching it, but I might have accidentally pushed the button or something. I don't know what I'm.
No, that's fine.
I haven't used this. I'm not totally. Yeah, I've
That's
used it a couple
cool.
times, but I haven't figured it all out. So I'm sorry about that.
No, 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 you're fine.
Yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is
yeah. Don't
that
take it personal if you see this
no,
later and
no,
you're like,
no, no.
"Hey, he gave me a thumbs down." Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
um, but
I'd give you a thumbs up if I could, but I don't even know how that
no,
happened.
it's okay. Don't touch anything. So it had to be bad in order to do that. Had to be bad in order for him to wipe everything out because everything had to be polluted. A lot of times in the Old Testament, people sit there and say, well, why did he say to kill the children, the women, kill their animals, kill the men, kill them all? What we don't know is how involved were sin right from the kiddos all the way up, including the women. How diseased were the animals? How much sexual immorality between humans and animals, or humans and humans, and what was going on that would pollute everything so bad that you had to just annihilate it and get rid of all of it. And I think that that's when he would do that. I believe that behind the scenes, this is why he did it. And I think the flood was the same way.
Now, do you believe that he might have lowered people's lives because they had entirely too much time to become evil?
That's exactly what he did. This is all um,
So,
I'm
like,
gonna
in an effort to have more souls saved, he's because like you hear about it as like uh better to destroy the body than lose a soul, right? In other words, he's saying it's
no.
better to kill them while they're saved than be,
Well,
or
the propagation of evil. This was all about management, like human resources. This is about managing the sin problem until and making sure that there's people at the very end. Lowering the our longevity, our age span was. I'm sure what we're going to find out. It was a very humane thing to do because had he kept it, I mean, it took 1,600 years for them to get to the point to where nobody wanted to do anything right, and whatever else that they did to the animal and human kingdom as far as genetic disease, perversion. So you couldn't let Hitler survive and try to work out his plan for 800 years. Better for them to get their stride at 20 or 30, go 40 years and then die.
yeah,
And unfortunately, good people too.
yeah.
Can't get going and then keep going. And it's
Mhm.
just,
So you describe it all to the fallen angel theory. Then you're the Sethite theory.
yeah, absolutely. To me, it
Okay.
makes so much more sense. I'm in a minority though. And what's
Mhm.
surprising is that, the Talmud speaks of this, and I think even Josephus speaks of this. I mean, there's so many credible, what appears to be credible sources that side with this theory, and including almost all of Protestantism. It surprises me that there aren't more of those who look at this and scrutinize it and say, "Wait a minute, is that what it's really saying?" When they say it's the sons of God can be three things. It can be good angels. It can be um, uh, Adam before he fell. In Luke, it talks about So and so begat so and so, as it goes backwards, who was the son of Enosh, who was the son of, who was this Adam, who was the son of God. So unfallen individuals are called sons of God. Good angels are called sons of God. And those who have been adopted back into the family through conversion are called sons and daughters of God. Never once does an evil angel call a son of God, ever. They're called fallen angels, demons. They're never referred to as sons of God, ever. Daughters of men, son of man, son of man. The reason why Jesus called himself the Son of God and Son of Man, because he was the Son of God poured into a body that had the propensity, not the desire, but had the propensity, if he chose, he had 4,000 years of fallen human nature that he was poured into as Jesus inside of this, and then overcame. This wasn't some Teflon Jesus that the Catholic Church painted. I'm a former Catholic, by the way.
Mhm.
You know,
So am
Mary
I.
being scrubbed of her original sin. No, 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 no. That's human thinking. No. The miracle is that Jesus had a fallen nature like ours, did not choose to sin, and overcame through his connection with the Father. So that's the reason why he was called Son of Man. He was called Son of Man because he had that fallen nature, yet did not sin. And that part of him that was in him was the Son of God. And Son of God, Son of Man. Daughters of men, saw the daughters of men, and the sons of God looked upon them. They were the progenitors of Seth. And they said, just like Samson, she's looking good. Don't do it, Samson. It's wrong to
Yeah.
intermarry between believers and unbelievers. I don't care. She pleases me. I want her. They enticed them. They were in the mountains. The Canaanites were in the valleys where it's better, but they had to keep away from them. That was the idea. And as a
When you
result of
read,
that,
you know, it's sad that you read the story and you're looking at him 3 times. She was setting him up. You can even tell she's setting you up to take your power, right? And he was still dumb enough to relieve or
no,
you know, let her know what or reveal what his strength was. You
yeah.
know, I was like, man, he is. How could he do that? But we see people do that all the time and not even notice it.
Well, when people are attracted to one another, the rationality can go right out the window. That's part of the problem. They're willing to do acts of passion, sometimes very bad acts of passion, as a result of that connection that they have with the opposite sex, you know? And so, yeah, I got questions with this theory that it was angels. It's like, okay, if you're going to take it literally and superimpose onto it that it was a fallen angel that had relations with these human women, it said that they were their spouses. So think about this for a second. Hey, Satan, I'm going to go live with this woman. Okay, see you later. Honey, I'm home. Oh, did you get some berries? Did you do some farming today? Yeah, I
Yeah,
did. That's what they're really saying. The glamour of it, or the horrific or weirdness of it, is just the idea that they had giant babies of
yeah.
some sort. Are we going to go to the Book of Enoch for our answer on this question? Those babies were 450 feet tall in the Book of Enoch, and the 200 good angels, even after the fall, even after the war in heaven, I'm supposed to believe that 200 angels, after they saw one third of their brethren get ripped from heaven because of their disobedience and all the horrificness that they had to go through during that war, during that separation, during them leaving, and they saw what sin does, and then they're going to sit up there, look down on the created women and go, hey, I think I'd like to become their husband. That means they fell. That means that one third of the angels fell just prior to the creation of the earth, and then 200, if we look at the Book of Enoch, 200 decide to leave heaven again so that they can become sires of giant children.
Now again, I do attain to the fallen angel theory, but I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're here to present what your view, just so my listeners have reference.
Good.
And yeah, like I said, we're on the same team. Okay,
We
or like
certainly
you
are,
say, we're on the same
Sergio.
team. And I got a question for you.
Okay.
Um, since you are a realtor, right?
Yeah.
You do realty. Let's talk about the biggest retail in the world now, the land of, or the land of Israel and Jerusalem specifically. What do you see going on over there?
First off, I can let you know that, yes, they got back to their homeland in 1948.
Mhm.
Great. I believe that at the very end of time, there are going to be some Jews who stand up for the right, who stand up for Christ, who stand up and are willing to, to speak against um, the Antichrist opposition. But that's it. They gave up their birthright when they stoned Stephen in 34 AD. They crucified Christ. Then they crucified the first martyr 3.5 years later, thus fulfilling the last week of Daniel, the 70th week of Daniel. And the apostle said to him, "How long are we supposed to forgive our brethren?" He said, 7 times 70. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. Wrap it up. And I don't have it verbatim in Daniel. That's 490 years. Jesus was asked, "How long am I supposed to forgive my friend, my brothers?" 7 times 70, 490. They came to the place where they forfeited it, and then Paul steps in, and the scriptures say this now goes to everybody. The Jews no longer are God's chosen people. They were at one time,
So you
but
believe in replacement theology?
what does that mean?
You believe in replacement theology,
Right. What does
where
that mean?
basically what replacement theology is saying is that because the Jews did not believe in Jesus, because they did not say he was Messiah, they are no longer his chosen people, and now his chosen people are the church, and all the promises given unto the Jews are now given unto the church. Is that your take on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so whosoever. Remember, even when the Jews
again
were,
again that
oh
that's
sure,
not
go ahead.
I still believe that Israel is God's chosen people. I still believe that if God can take away his promises to Israel and the Jews, well, then he can take his promises away from everybody. So that's just my take on it.
What do you
um
mean?
well, just like the blessings and everything that he's promised for the Jewish people, that if he can do away with that and call that null and void and give it to someone else, I think we should all be worried, because he could just do that to us as well.
It's always been whosoever, right from the very beginning. It just happens that the Jews were his spokespeople who blew it constantly, always. And they never got it together. In the beginning, that they perhaps you could make an argument that they did, maybe the second time around, and when they came to the promised land. But after that, it was just apostasy after apostasy. Look, they're cursed with the carnal nature, just like you and I are. And that's the reason why Abraham was so important. He showed what righteousness by faith is all about. And that is believing God's word, having a heart for God, irrespective of any kind of, look, he assigned them that. There was no, there wasn't anything special about them. He gave them an assignment and they blew it after that final testing time of the 490 years. They killed Jesus and then they killed Stephen. And then that was it. They're done. Now, will they play a part in the very end of time? Yes, they will. As evangelists for God's last day church and the opposition between the Antichrist force and the church of God, whatever that is. And I won't go into that right now about the specifics,
But
but it says,
one thing within all that is that we do have to keep in mind is, uh, unlike the Jehovah's Witnesses that say there's 144,000 meant to go into church, actually
right.
those 144,000 are people from the tribes of Israel. They come together to preach the word in the last days.
I believe that no, it's going to be whosoever that allows the Spirit of God to reflect the character of Christ in them. So what you're
Yeah.
saying is that
Well,
the
it
Jew,
does say in the Bible though that it's 12,000 from each one of the tribes. Uh,
absolutely. Now the question is, what does that mean? Does that mean 12,000 literal Jewish virgins or Jews
well,
or
from the different
12,000?
tribes, because I'm not sure if you've been hip to it, but most of those 12 tribes have been found now. Yeah,
No,
the Pantu.
no. I mean, I'm not saying they haven't, but there's no relevance there. Here,
Well, if
let me just say this. In Revelation 14:12, that's the key right there. Here are they. It's like a crescendo. Listen very carefully. And those of you guys out there, if anything else that we've talked about is superfluous compared to this, please understand. It says that here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So whether they're a Jew, a Gentile, doesn't matter. The characteristic of the people at the very, very end of time that are going to go through the opposition of the Antichrist is going to be those who keep the commandments of God and have or keep the faith of Jesus. That's it. That's the qualification. Now, let me tell you something. Those who do that, who have that quality of a relationship with God and have allowed Him to work within them in such a way that they're able to keep all 10 commandments, while the Antichrist opposition is putting a death decree on them at some point, and the whole world is not on their side. The whole world, and the world is collapsing around us. And they point to those people who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus and say they're the ones, the reason why we're seeing this collapse. I believe that makes so much more sense than to say, oh, those Jews, man, this is what, you know what, let me be really frank, okay? If I might.
Mhm.
I find it appalling to see these Christian leaders rubbing shoulders. I've seen this myself personally, rubbing shoulders with the Jews like there's some sort of lucky charm. That's how they act. They act as if you're the one who is God's chosen people. And yes, we believe in Jesus and everything.
I do attain to that, and
My friend,
I think I might have some Jewish ancestry myself.
that's fine. Whosoever. Paul was a Jew. Whosoever. Paul said, if you believe like Abraham, you're a Jew.
Mhm.
And those Jews in the Revelation, that's all apocalyptic language. You're supposed to look at them and say, okay, this is symbolic language. When I go to the Old and New Testament, especially the Old Testament, what does this say? What is it unlocking? That's how it's supposed to go. There are no Jewish virgins that are going to be doing this thing. That's my own take on it.
Okay.
But no, they're not a lucky charm. They're not somebody to rub shoulders with and to be admired because they're Jews. No, no,
Well,
they're
not
no,
because they're Jews, but because they're God's people.
no, they're
That's what
not.
I believe. I
You may
still
believe
believe.
that, but
I believe that.
it's not biblically accurate
I
from
mean,
my understanding of Daniel and the New
I
Testament.
I still think they're the people of
And a lot
Israel.
of
That's
people
why,
do.
and I'm gonna stand by that. Like I said, you can have your beliefs. I'm gonna have mine. But we are getting close to the hour.
Okay,
If you can tell people how to find you and
sure.
about your
So
ministry.
yeah, absolutely. So we deal mostly, this conversation that we got off on, it's not something that we normally do, but if you're interested in, creation science, a lot of what Dr. Hovind does, which he's awesome, and he does a really good job. And we're at the Lost World Museum. You can find us at lostworldmuseum.com, but we're on Instagram and Facebook, especially Facebook and YouTube right at the moment, at least. You can find us there, and you can come and watch some videos and enjoy it on the fun.
Well, all right. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Grotto on the Tar Pit. We usually pray out, but I'm a few seconds out before I gotta cut this. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.